Dr. Dan Allender. Thank you so much for being on the Compare to You podcast today.
Oh, Heather, my delight, my delight. And let's just be honest, we had a very, shall we say, inelegant beginning because
Elegant.
uh, I couldn't find the not record, but the microphone on button. And to be able to say, as I've experienced you on your other podcasts, you're a very kind and gracious woman. So thank you for
Oh,
having me on and, shall we say, enduring my mechanical or technological incompetence.
oh, no, no. So, what you need to know, Dan, is that there are probably only four or five authors, and you're more than an author, but four or five influential voices that of books I've read that, I would love to meet the author. I'm losing my words today. Um, and and I would say two of those men have passed on, and so it is just a great honor to talk to you because Dan, like you ruined my life in the best way.
Hmm.
um,
Well, thank you. But just to say, again, so honored and I'm grateful I've not passed on.
yes, I'm grateful for that too. but so it was about 17 years ago. My husband was a student at Dallas Theological Seminary, and we had our first taste of biblical counseling, and it wrecked our lives. And as a part of it, our biblical counselor in Dallas said, "You need to start reading these books by Dan Allender." And so
Hmm.
we worked through the To Be Told storybook. We
Hmm.
read Wounded Heart. My husband was all about leading with a limp. So your whole repertoire just impacted us at such a deep level. And and what we're going to talk about today is this brand new marriage book you have, but I really hope that we go so much further than that. We're going to have to talk fast. We only have an hour. But in one of the things for me, and the reason why I use the word ruined or devastated, destroyed, like all of those synonyms are appropriate
Hmm.
because the old Heather 17 years ago really did have to crumble
Hmm.
lest she continue the patterns of her family and her past and her woundings and really the word you use through this book and the word that's I guess used everywhere now, but I want to talk about that too. But the word trauma, like
Hmm.
I didn't think I had any trauma. My
Right.
parents they still are married. I didn't have the big capital T trauma stories. And so I looked at my story and I was like, I should be fine.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong
Yeah.
here. And what I love about your new book is how you talk about so many things related to this. So can I just start with a question?
Oh,
Like,
let's
do
jump.
do we all have trauma?
Well, let's just say anyone who lives east of Eden. And if your address includes, again, not just the word Eden, but actually you've not left Eden, then no, you wouldn't. But if you have, like most of us, then the reality is, and I love the way you put it, like most people think of capital T trauma, that's significant emotional, physical, or sexual abuse. But the complication is, no matter how good your parents are or were, they were sinners. And if we take Matthew 5, Jesus's words about the nature of sin seriously, it means that as a father with adult children, I struggle past, present, and future until I see him and then I become as he is with sin. And sin is this interplay of lust. And again, we quickly think that's sexual, which certainly includes, but it's desire, craving gone mad, the demand to fill something that feels empty within us, and then anger. And again, we know Jesus talks about lust as adultery, which, again, in the Old Testament particularly, but even in the New Testament, is more akin to the word idolatry.
Mhm.
So we make idols of our Bible reading. We make
Yeah.
idols of having a new car, et cetera, et cetera. So when we begin to explore how we attempt to find life, our own idolatry plays itself out with our children, with
Mhm.
our spouse, etc. And then when we don't get what we crave, then we're going to make someone pay. And
Mhm.
often that's our spouse or
Mhm.
someone, but it can be ourselves. We can
Mhm.
make ourselves pay. We are murderers, Jesus says. So
Mhm.
again, that kind of hyperbolic language, if I were just to say it, and even when I do, I think a lot of people think it's hyperbole. And you kind
Mhm.
of go, well, if you want to blame Jesus for hyperbole, that's fair.
Mhm.
But you also have to take seriously what he's addressing.
Mhm.
So, as a spouse, adultery and murder is playing out all the time
Mhm.
between me and my children,
Mhm.
between me and my parents, who are no
Mhm.
longer on the earth, but nonetheless, if we begin to look at what we'll largely call developmental trauma, was
Mhm.
there true attunement? That
Mhm.
sense of I feel you, see you, I
Mhm.
experience something of your world. And then a kind of I can hold, we call that containment, but I can
Mhm.
hold your big emotions.
Mhm.
I'm not undone. I don't have to resolve, but I can engage you and I can repair all
Mhm.
the ruptures that occur. So when we think about, did your really good mom or dad truly get you? And
Mhm.
then did they free you and yet hold you in terms of what you experienced? And maybe the most important, did they have the ability to say, Heather, I, I don't know if you heard it, but I was unkind to you, and
Mhm.
my comment to you had a
Mhm.
bite to it. I want to own
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
So that ability to enter into what we call small T developmental trauma is probably
Mhm.
where most of us have our deepest structure of becoming who we are, and
Mhm.
that is playing out in marriage
Mhm.
every day.
Yes. Yes. Well, so I'm thinking here about my audience, who's by and large women, although I know I have some men listening too. I don't want to exclude them, but by and large, were people where there was a wounding early on in some
Yes.
way, shape, or form, recognized or not, right? That told us there's something wrong with our physical bodies. We're
Yes.
supposed to look different. And we can control that. There's some way to make it right, to correct this wrong through the pursuit of beauty or a smaller body or, whatever those things look like. Like, can you explain maybe what some of the little T traumas, obviously there's big T traumas that can affect that too, but what would that maybe typically look like for someone with this set of challenges?
Well, if we start with the larger realm, which is hardest to do because it's just the water we swim in, like a fish. The
Mhm.
fish doesn't like have a kind of like, I'm in water. No, it's
Mhm.
just the world they're in.
Mhm.
In the same way, what I would say is patriarchy plays
Mhm.
a phenomenal role
Mhm.
that women are to be small,
Mhm.
small, like don't disrupt me.
Mhm.
Don't invite me as a man to face my own lust and anger.
Mhm.
Don't show the results of my adultery and murder. In fact,
Mhm.
you are the helpmeet
Mhm.
that's meant to sort of allow me to do the
Mhm.
big things.
Mhm.
And you, little woman,
Mhm.
again, I'm speaking about voice, presence,
Mhm.
power, but it certainly affects that sensibility of there is a view of beauty that's not only external but internal as to you are meant to conform to
Mhm.
my definition of what it
Mhm.
means to be a woman, let alone a beautiful woman. And
Mhm.
again, it's dark. It's the intersection of exploitation, lust,
Mhm.
and degradation,
Mhm.
murder.
Mhm. Wow. Wow. But the gospel has a, I mean, I know Jesus wasn't the champion for the patriarchy, but the gospel has a richer answer than just down with the patriarchy. Correct?
Well, again, who's the first evangelist?
Mm,
Who is the first to proclaim the resurrection?
mm. A
It's a
woman.
woman.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
not a small incident, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
it just happened.
Mm-hmm.
Again, as if anything just sort of happens in the sovereign work of God. But I think there's meant to be, look, if the gospel wasn't true, if you were trying to say in that day how to make sure people believed, you wouldn't have a woman be
Mm-hmm.
the first testimony
Yes.
of the resurrection.
Right.
Um, because a woman was never even allowed to be
Mm-hmm.
in a court of law
Mm-hmm.
offering testimony. So
Mm-hmm.
the reversal, oh my
Yes.
gosh, it's
Yes.
so sweet. It's like you just go, oh Jesus.
Mm.
You like this is a new thought. You really knew what you were doing.
Mm. Yes. We sometimes just need to tell ourselves that, though, I think. So one of the things I tried to read through this whole book yesterday, and let me just like warn anyone, you can't read the book in a day. It's just way too much to digest. And in some ways, as I'm reading it, I was thinking like it's taken me like 16 or 17 years to even be able to start digesting some of this. So there's a lot there. It's so rich. But you talked about how we often find a mate who I don't you didn't use the word compensate. I wish I had the quote pulled up, but our choice of a of a spouse is often about kind of healing or thinking we're avoiding something from our past, right? I'm going to marry someone who's different than my mother was, so I don't have to face that same pressure. Can you fill that out?
Oh, well, again, the best way to do it is to say that Becky my wife Becky had what I would call a very critical and really the better word is cruel mother who, in many ways, made her pay for having a voice. So she learned two deep things. One was to keep her mouth shut.
Mhm,
And if she was going to do something, be very sneaky about it. And
mhm,
she would play in a closet to
mhm,
avoid having to deal with the judgment of her mother. But she also learned to be incredibly independent, where she needed very little from
mhm,
anyone. My background is I have a mom who fits the term borderline personality
mhm,
disorder. People don't know that term. It's my mom could be hilarious, witty, playful, and the next moment be weeping,
mhm,
literally collapse on the floor,
mhm,
and then be cruel and
mhm,
demeaning. And again, we're talking minutes now, laughing, then collapsing, then cruel, and then look at me or anyone and be like, what's your problem?
mhm,
So I lived in absolute unpredictability, but my major quote unquote role was as a surrogate spouse to my mom. My dad wouldn't engage her. So, as
mhm,
an only child, my job was to keep my mom as sane as one could hope.
mhm,
So, right there, if you see the interlocking worlds,
mhm,
I don't want to marry somebody who needs me,
mhm,
but somebody who um, is intrigued
mhm,
and open to what I did as a boy, which was I talked. I'm
mhm,
a storyteller. I
mhm,
kept my family alive by stories.
mhm,
So Becky was quiet but independent.
mhm,
I was wild, but at one level centered enough to never bring the kind of cruelty that she had suffered with her
mhm,
mom. So it worked. We worked great for a while until, and I really mean this, until Becky began to mature.
mhm,
And then all of a sudden, there were disruptions. She began to name, you're an angry man.
mhm,
You isolate to your books.
mhm,
your idolatry, you're not drunk on power or this or that, but you're an isolated man who would
Mm,
prefer to just go to his library and read for 2 days.
mhm,
So as we began to just engage the normal realities that people
mm,
have conflicts in, like sex,
mm,
money, children, in-laws, oh my gosh, the reality of our what we married for was redemption, and what we
mm,
found was a taste of hell.
mm,
And I think that is where I would say I've never in any relationship had a taste of what I believe heaven will be as I have with Becky.
mm,
But I'd also say, just as I just said, I've never had a taste of hell like I've
mm,
had with her. So when you begin to own that a marriage, if it's, I think, growing, that's a key word, growing,
mm,
will be a marriage of extremity. There will be
mm,
exposure. There will be heartache and hurt. There will be confrontation. There will be
mm,
invitation. There will be transformation. And when you begin to play in those realms, like nothing I have ever done in my
mm.
life has been more important than conning Becky to marry me.
And and that was a fabulous story in the book. Hadn't seen or heard all of all of the richness there for sure. The story you told at the beginning of the book about the ski trip.
Yeah. Oh, it's such an important, I mean, it was transformation for us of me acting out in anger toward my son who wouldn't ski down and Becky and I and our son Andrew, he's about 8, and it's not going well. Our
Mm,
daughters have skied away to go in for an early lunch, and I'm pressuring.
mm,
Um, I'm I can be intimidating, I can be belligerent. That was what I did to
mm,
keep my mother from consuming me,
mm,
is my mother and I would rage at one another.
mm,
Not exactly a healthy
mm,
mother-son relationship, but that level of intensity I was bringing, and Andrew was getting terrified. And Becky's response was, "Go ski down. You go on down. I'll get him down." And I could see from 400 yards below that her encouraging presence was not working.
mm,
So I finally decided to have to clomp my way back up on an icy slope. And by the 30, 40 yards up, I am literally sweating like a madman. And by the time I got up, I'm not hot angry. I am cold furious. And I remember skiing toward them, put my skis on, move toward them, and Becky skied in front of Andrew,
mm,
and I mouthed the word move.
mm,
And she very quietly,
mm,
no anger, but just quietly shook her head. No.
mm,
So I got to her, and I'm about to, in one sense, tell her to get down and that I'll get my son down. And probably one of the most shocking moments, again, there have been many, but I'd say one of the most shocking moments was when she put her hand on my heart and she
mm,
said these simple words: "I know the men who have humiliated you."
mm,
And that beginning portion of that first sentence, I could not, I mean, if I'd been struck by lightning, I would not have been more shocked,
mm,
because in an instant, literally a millisecond, I have the right hemisphere of my brain passing images,
mm,
moments,
mm,
and at a speed literally of 400 or 500 miles per hour. And then she looked at me and then she said, hand still on my heart, "I know that's not what you want to do with your
mm,
son."
mm,
And one of the sweetest moments of tears came. I wish they had come 100 times before and 100 times after, but they came.
mm,
And she put her hand a bit firmer on my
mm,
heart and gave me unquestionably the sweetest, again, to even use the word accolade is too small, but
mm,
the greatest award I've ever gotten. And that's when she said, "You're a good man."
mm,
So that story is longer, but let's just say that was for both of us another moment where she's taking on the voice of not being small.
Right.
She's actually bringing my story into play, but she's also calling me, exposing me,
Mhm.
calling me.
Mhm.
Again, they're almost so simultaneous that it's hard to differentiate the two.
Mhm.
She's exposing and calling me into the man that I long to be, have the
Mhm.
ability to be, and often am not. So we look back to that as, we have a lot of origin stories, but
Mhm.
we would look back to that as one of our major origin stories for both of our transformations.
Yeah. Wow. I just I would love to meet Becky. I want to come to Seattle and have coffee with her. So if you could set that up.
Plan on it.
But her courage. I mean, especially when I mean, and I relate to this, when you were a little girl who faced an angry parent and you couldn't stand up to that.
Yes.
To not just replay that with you and be like, okay, and wow, like I mean, I was very touched by that story. But how did Becky I mean, I know the Holy Spirit, obviously, but the healing that had to take place, I think, for her to get to that place, to have the courage with you, and then how she just like had the healing touch of that in your life. I'm just I'm in awe of that.
Me too. And again, I mean, there are 100 other stories. I mean, another context well before, but
Mhm,
not like years or a decade before. Um, w- we had been, this was a season where we didn't have a caller ID. So we get a phone call at our home. And when people call me, I'm a therapist. When people call me, it's not usually with good news.
mhm,
So I often wanted Becky to answer the phone before I knew who was going to be on the other line. It gave me 10 seconds.
mhm,
And if it were particular people would be like, no, this is not a good time.
mhm,
So I would have her answer, and she would say, well, hi, Fred. And then I would shake my head. I'd go like, no, 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 no. And she did it. She covered for me. She was being quote unquote a good helpmeet, which
mhm,
is not what the scriptures
mhm,
teach with
mhm.
regard to an Acer, a woman who is indeed a warrior on
Just say it has a
behalf.
military context, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, so that's the context. And I shook my head when Fred called. And I remember the day that Becky looked at me and she goes, or no, she said to Fred, Dan, I'm not sure what he wants to do, but whatever he wants to do, I'm going to put the phone down and let him decide. And I'm like, oh, good Lord. And she walked away. And I mean, my eyes followed her. And it was like, this phone call's not going to last for infinity. So I talked to Fred for a bit, hung up, and then I hunted her down. And that's a
Mhm,
tragic word. It really is a tragic
mhm,
word. I hunted her down. She was in her office reading, and I opened the door. And again, anger has been uh, my means by which to keep the world at bay, to keep from being largely eaten
mhm,
by a devouring mother, and to call to some degree my very passive, disengaged father into some level of life. So all that to say, I opened the door, enraged, and then said as coldly as a little serpent, like, "What were you thinking?" And then she held the book up and said, trying to live out what you have brilliantly written in the book Bold Love, but have yet to actually
Wow.
begun to do on my behalf.
Wow.
And I remember looking at her thinking, oh, that was brilliant.
Wow.
Brilliant. I mean, it was so well done that I
Mhm,
couldn't just, I certainly didn't repent at that point,
mhm,
but I remember walking away going, I just got handed my own book.
mhm,
And, but more importantly, of course, I handed what I do claim I want to be.
mhm,
And yet, in my own lust and anger, so often fail. So that intersection of the invitation exposure, offering a taste of goodness in the face.
Mhm.
In some sense, what she was doing was at that moment blessing her enemy.
Mhm.
How she has grown to be that woman, and there are a lot of factors, but a
Mhm.
lot has been engaging over many, many moons the reality of the harm,
Mhm.
and then coming to not only grieve, but be angry, but even more so, to begin to honor
Mhm.
more the reality of her own parents' effect on her.
Mhm.
You honor not by dishonesty.
Mhm.
And the more she has named her own story, engaged something of her own failure to love in the way that she
Mhm.
was meant to,
Mhm.
our lives, again, we would never say we are finished by any
Mhm.
means. But there is, after 48 years, just delight, delight
Mhm.
for one another and honor. And
Mhm.
that's what we want to say is so crucial for a marriage to grow in
Mhm.
this sense of ability where delight increases your sense of gratitude for one another.
Mhm.
And honor opens the door to a sense of awe. Like I
Mhm.
look at my wife and at times just go, who are you? How did you become who you are?
Mhm.
That is one of the greatest thrills, I think, in a marriage.
I love that. You talk about the list, what shame, judgment, resentment are the things that kind of stamp out that honor and delight.
Yeah. Well, just think of it this way. Many people have really good marriages, but they're not really growing together.
Mhm. Mhm.
And when I define the word good, it
Mhm.
means they love each other. They
Mhm.
like each other. They spend time with each other. But it's more about comfort. Just
Mhm.
kind of like you're my old pair of slippers, and I can't imagine not having you around.
Mhm.
And convenience, like we just do good together. Well, fantastic. I think many people would call that a great marriage. I
Mhm.
just wouldn't.
Mhm.
Why? Because the realities of your own lust and anger, the reality of your own heartache, past and present, are not being addressed.
Mhm.
You're not in the valley of the shadow of death
Mhm.
together in a way in which you can anticipate the banquet before your
Mhm.
enemies. So
Mhm.
that's part of what we're trying to accomplish in the deep rooted marriages, an invitation into how our past is playing out in the present and is meant in the present to be disrupted in a way in
Mhm.
which we're really, in one sense, having the invitation from each other to greater healing,
Mhm.
greater understanding of the work of the Spirit in
Mhm.
each of our lives, so that we're seeing actually the very thing we wanted from the beginning,
Mhm.
redemption, but not quite in the way we thought when
Mhm.
we didn't even wittingly know we were seeking redemption,
Right.
yet we were. Now we know we are, not to, in one sense, perfect one another, but to be the face of God on behalf of one another. I just don't think
Mhm.
there's a sweeter or deeper reason to be married
Mhm.
than I get to be the one who gives my beloved a taste of what she is going to have for eternity.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, you didn't know that you I hate to say the word triggered. Dan, that's so, like, overused, right? But but I broke up with someone in my 20s because he told me that I was like that old pair of slippers. I was always there. I was like, "No, I want more. Like, I don't wanna be married to someone who feels like
Oh,
this is just comfortable. I want more." And, I mean, it was just a dating relationship, so it wasn't that deep of a breakup, if you will, but yes, I hear that. I know that's what so many long for. But what if it's just you longing for that? What if your
oh,
spouse isn't there and it's okay? I'm good with slippers. Slippers are comfortable. What do you do?
yeah. Well, let's just start with this premise. Desire is never equal in a marriage.
Mm.
ever over anything. You don't likely have anything where you would say, if you put desire on a scale 1 to 10, that we each want to make love at a 9 or a 10 at that moment, or that we want to go to Italian restaurant at 9 or a 10 exactly at that moment. So if you begin by saying that desire is always the place of fundamental difference, and how we then, quote unquote, manage difference is largely we either ignore it or just compromise. Let's go. We went to the lovely Greek restaurant last week. Fine. You want to go to Italian today? Great. But it's sort of that 50-50. I give a bit, you give a bit, and we get along. And I'm, again, hardly finding fault with that. I'm just saying difference is where we feel the tension of, in some sense, the greatest point of conflict between us. So, how we fail to engage what is in your desire and or your lack of desire, and a kind of curiosity, a commitment to be able to enter into difference with conflict is actually meant to create curiosity and compassion, a kind of like, wow, this is really something you don't like. Can we explore that? Not to change you, but because it's how you engage the world, whether it's for good or ill, it's where you are not the same as me. So,
Yeah.
in the area of growing, this is where, and it's madness. Like, like if you're a believer in Jesus, you're a follower of Jesus, and growth is not central, all I want to go is then a stable marriage is literally, if I do it like a heartbeat, means you're dead. So stability is nothing to proclaim as the ultimate goal of a good marriage. And I mean a good marriage. So one of the things that has to be engaged is, I want to grow, and I don't sense that you do. And so what happens if I keep growing is we're going to be further apart. And I don't want to be further apart. But I'm not going to not grow in order to keep you and I from a form of division.
Right.
So if
Right.
you don't choose to grow, at one level, you're giving up our marriage. And if that's the case, it'd be better to know today than a year or 2 or 3 down the road. Now, that sounds presumptuous, perhaps, or confrontational, but it's just the way of beginning with regard to, like, when you go to church, what for? You read the Bible, what for? If it's not to become more like Jesus, then I'm perplexed. But I do think convenience, comfort, control, and that's a key word. If we add that third C, I don't want to enter this conversation because I don't want to deal with my alcoholic father. I don't want to deal with the fact that my uncles, who I just call weird, did things like walking in while I was showering and standing talking to me in a way that felt very inappropriate. We use lots of language like weird, inappropriate, strange to actually get close, but not actually name that was sexually abusive. So, for a man, particularly with regard to vulnerability, owning up to my angry mother, who I still feel loyal to, I can't afford. She's been off the earth 10 years, or she's still alive. I can't afford to mess with the loyalty that was not of God
Mm.
when you asked me to begin to enter small and large T trauma.
Mm.
So this is where, as a spouse, oh, this is a dangerous sentence. You need to be more committed to your spouse than your marriage,
Mm. Wow.
because a lot of people are committed to their marriage
Mhm.
being sustainable,
Mhm.
comfortable, convenient,
Mhm.
controllable,
Mhm.
not committed to growth.
Mhm.
And so, again, we're not talking about demanding change.
Mhm.
We're talking about the ability to engage the heart
Right.
in a way that invites curiosity. But again, back to maybe a key word here is Romans chapter 2, verse 4. It is the kindness of God that
Mhm.
leads to repentance.
Mhm.
And then Paul goes on to say, why do you treat the kindness of God with contempt? So,
Mhm.
right there, I would, in almost all the work I do with couples or individuals who are struggling in their marriages, uh, how are you doing
Mhm.
in the invitation to
Mhm.
repent
Mhm.
based not on your spouse changing, but on the kindness of God?
Mhm.
And then, how kind are you to the young, unaddressed, broken parts of your own heart?
Mhm.
Because uh, the failure to be kind to oneself always has an implication for how kind you are to others. And
Mhm.
if you think you can be kind to others
Mhm.
and refuse to be kind
Mhm.
to your own heart, sorry,
Mhm.
sorry. It just is not the way we have literally, neurologically, let alone spiritually, been created.
Mhm. Thank you for saying that. Yes. Yes. I've had that conversation many times with women who tell me that they are so good at giving grace to everyone else, just not good at giving to themselves. I'm like, oh, that's actually true. So
Well,
I and I understand it. God.
well, to me, it's as simple as this. You're writing checks and you don't have anything in the bank.
Mhm.
That's generally called fraud.
Mhm. That's true. That's true. And I'm just thinking about how you're talking about kind of you didn't use this word, but essentially like a complacency that we develop in marriage, right? And the things we call love, right? Because kind of complacency equals love because we're still married or however you
Yeah.
define it, right? But that call to honor and delight. I mean, that word delight, like that's really hard for me. Like I might cry. um, but just thinking about that level of I want someone to delight in me. And the call to that is so big.
Mm.
It's and I feel like ultimately on my journey, I'm gonna blame the fact that you're a counselor as to why but I feel like on my journey, it has been really and I have a wonderful husband who we both have been working on our stuff, working on our traumas and kind of trying to explore these concepts of honor and delight. So this is not negative towards him at all, but just for me recognizing I have to figure out how to feel the Lord's delight
Yeah.
because it's very difficult for me to feel anyone's.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and here's the paradox. That for me, it's very important. I just got home from a trip, and my wife met me. We live on an island. I take a ferry home, and when I got off the ferry, and she's waiting for me, and I can see in her eyes, like I'm excited to see you.
Mhm.
Well, I had gotten up Eastern Standard Time at about 1:30 in the
Mhm.
morning to be able to make it back. And I had a less than pleasant flight, let's just say.
Mhm.
And so I'm feeling like my face is maybe about 6 feet long and I'm scraping along, and I'm like, I can see her delight and I want to mirror back to her the delight, but I also feel like I'm just sort of stumbling. I've got a cold, I'm tired, and it, her ability at that point to be able, when she held me and I held her, to be able to say, your face looks like someone ran over it. And I'm like, that's hilarious. Just totally hilarious, which was incredible attunement on her
Mhm.
part, because what she's saying is, my face is so much more alive for you
Mhm.
than your face
Uh,
is for me. And I will not pull away.
mhm.
I will not judge you, but I'm also not going to pretend like it's not, like it's just fine.
Mhm.
So all that, when you begin to go, oh, look, even one moment of sweet delight, when we went to bed last night, I just said to her, I really do wish my face then and now had the
Mhm.
same play of delight for you that you had for me, but thank you. And
Mhm.
it's like, well, you're welcome.
Mhm.
Not, oh no, there's no effort to pretend, but
Mhm.
what I'm trying to get to is one dollop. Boy, it's enough at
Mhm.
times to
Mhm.
be able to create the hunger for what you were most made for. But here's my point. The more you taste it, the
Mhm.
more it becomes part of your grief,
Mhm.
because I've got a remarkable wife,
Mhm.
and we still fight over things like
Mhm.
a baked potato that she thought was done and I didn't. We're in the kitchen having really a nasty interaction over minutes over this baked potato. And it's like, how can, what? What? Yet the taste of what is so good creates a hunger for what only heaven can provide.
Mhm.
So in that sense, the sweeter your marriage gets,
Mhm.
at some level, the harder it becomes.
Mhm. Yes. Wow. Can we change course here? We just got a couple minutes left. I was listening. You've got a wonderful podcast. You and Rachel on the Allender Center podcast talk about a variety of very helpful things. I highly recommend it. But I'm listening to you interview Dr. Kurt Thompson, and you're talking about shame or something. And then all of a sudden you asked him about food. Like, what is going on? And you did a series on food. Oh, it was a number of years ago, maybe five, six. It was a long time ago. Um, and I know you've got a food story.
Yes.
um, I know we don't we don't have time for a full episode on that. I wish we did. But could you just maybe like speak to the fact I think we live in a culture, right, where especially like my audience of women and men who've had eating disorders and, control issues around food, and food, has not been a source of delight or anything symbolic of hunger has been evil. Right. Delight is sinful, is kind of, the cultural terms we use around,
Yeah.
good tasting foods. Can uh, just, I don't know, your best wisdom. That's a really horrible way to like ask a question. That's not a question at all. But but what are we missing when it comes to this good gift of food and what it can teach us about other things?
All right. Well, you can edit this out if you wish, but let's
Okay.
start with this. In the womb, you have your fingers in one of two places:
Okay.
in your mouth,
Mhm.
because they're more nerve sensitive cells in your mouth, or if you're a boy, on your penis, if you're a girl, your clitoris. So, sex and food
Mm,
are the realms where we bear the greatest shame,
mm,
because it's also where we bear the greatest potential for pleasure. It's
mm,
also where the reality of the gospel is spoken about as union, a knowing.
mm,
And that knowing is not a left brain, I know you.
mm,
It's a full bodied, full brained, full, in one sense, sensual experience of lovemaking. Well, where is shame most profoundly located for most of us? It's in the intersection of our mouth, food, and
mm,
therefore our larger body in terms of being to this or to that or to whatever, and our sexuality.
Mm,
So when you begin to say, why did God put so many nerve endings in
mm,
our genitalia and our mouth? Well, I don't know. So I'm suggesting because he wanted to talk about the reality of what union with him and
mm,
fellowship with him is most about.
mm,
Union, sexuality, fellowship, banquet. And what's the banquet? It's one of the most sensual things we do as a human being with others than making love.
mm,
So, no wonder our struggles tend to be regarding shame, exposure,
mm,
judgment, a sense of contempt. Why do you treat the kindness of God with contempt?
mm,
So our bodies and our eating becomes a place of contempt. Our
mm,
sexuality becomes a place of contempt. And no wonder the interplay of food and sex becomes an issue for many marriages.
mm.
So I think if you begin to go nerve endings, gospel, you've got some categories as to why that playground is fraught with a lot of struggle.
Yes. Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, there's the shame, right? It's the shame. And I just kind of maybe this is the last question to tie it up here. Like we know Jesus, we know the gospel covers our shame, but I feel like we jump to that too quickly.
Oh, we do. Brilliant point. And that's where, because Jesus took our shame,
Mhm,
and in one sense, Hebrews 12, that first verses 1 through 5, for the joy set before him, he endured the shame of the cross. So, because he's ultimately saying, anytime you're shamed, it's my shame.
mhm,
Therefore, there is meant to be a freedom not to escape shame, but to be able to enter it. But
mhm,
here's the difficulty. When you experience shame, even from memory of 20, 30 years ago, your body actually experiences, your brain experiences a degree of trauma. So there's going to be fragmentation. There's going to be some degree of numbing
mhm,
and a desire to isolate. So when
mhm,
you've got those three factors, fragmentation, numbing, isolation, whenever we get close to shame, essentially we're on the run away from it. And yet marriage is meant to be the one place where the reality of shame has sufficient safety
mhm,
to be able to go, I feel like a fool.
mhm,
I feel so dark and dangerous or vile. Can I come and be in a conversation? Again, I'm not saying that your spouse should be your therapist,
mhm,
but on the other hand, there should not be stories that deeply held in a locker
mhm,
that shape who you are, that you're not at least moving toward
mhm,
being able to grow, maybe over a decade, to be able to share with your spouse. So
mhm,
there were stories that Becky shared with me. I remember about a year, about 24, something she shared with me. I won't go into detail. And I was both heartbroken for the story, but also irritated. Like,
mhm,
why didn't you share that with me before?
mhm,
And her kind words were, it took me 24 years to trust you with this story. And so I'm trusting, though we've been married 48 years, there will be stories my beloved will share with me
mhm,
in our 50, 50 years married. I would pray for more than 60 years. Then to be able to say, are you angry or irritated that your spouse took that long to trust you?
mhm,
That's how powerful shame is. It
mhm,
takes a long while to enter those stories, even though they have shaped you and they need to be addressed. And that's where, again, part of that work is good therapist, good coach,
mhm,
good spiritual director
mhm,
that can begin that process of helping you come into a level of reconnection with your
mhm,
body,
mhm,
with your story, really with your heart.
mhm.
then over time, trust can be built that growingly, because trust is never final,
Mhm.
growingly built to be able to say, I am meant to be the face
Mhm.
of God on your behalf.
Wow. I love it. Wow. Well, Dr. Allender, you've got this new book, The Deep Rooted Marriage. Can you give us the 30-second just pitch on it? I know it's available everywhere books are sold. It's out now. What do we need to know about this fantastic book aside from some of the things we've discussed today? Just what's the overview?
Well, your past is playing out in the present. Whenever you're triggered, whenever there is an interaction that doesn't go as you would wish, it isn't just the problem in the moment. There is rooted
Mhm.
systems that we have to engage. And to the degree we engage the past and the present, we really do have the potential for a present future redemption, not only for ourselves, but for our marriage. And that's where I just want people to have a sense of growing delight and honor on behalf of one another and oneself.
I love it. Dr. Dan Allender, I'm so glad we figured out the mute button.
So glad. Oh, Heather, thank you for your kindness through that whole process.
thank, thank you so much for your time today. This has been invaluable. So thank you so much. And thank you for watching or listening today. I hope something today has helped you stop comparing and start living. Bye bye.